Welcome to Powered Up, the podcast connecting industry-leading voices who are energising the future. Today's guest went from being the only woman in the room at a small engineering firm to becoming its CEO. She's grown the business by 17 people to 50 and revenue up to 153%. And she's challenging the industry on something we don't talk about enough: technical competence, leadership and clarity. Mara, welcome to Powered Up. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about the conversation today.
Fantastic. Me too. I'd love to start with your journey. I know that when you joined Enspec Power, you were the only woman in the business. What was that environment like and how did that shape the leader you've become?
Oh, you know what? I think I was very lucky to join such a lovely group of guys. And that's what it was. I really was, it didn't hit me really until it was my sort of first proper day. I was like, oh, right. Yeah. I'm the only woman in the business right now. And it's not to say, because Enspec is a 25-year-old electrical engineering firm. Throughout its history, there have been other women in the room. But at the time that I joined, in the room that I joined, yes, I was the only one. But everybody was very kind, very laid back, understood that I came in with a different discipline and expertise. Interestingly, and this is only after strategic success of what I was brought in to do. Interestingly, some of them came up and actually apologized, saying that when I joined, they didn't think it would work. They didn't believe in marketing. They didn't think it would work, and they could see the sort of proof from what was brought in. But I just think that that's really kind and open and honest, and we're an authentic bunch.
Fantastic. I think it plays true testament to joining when it's 17 people and fully male dominated, like most of the engineering industry, to then working your way up to CEO. So by going through the transition through the business and with the growth, how's that changed or shaped the leader that you've become at Inspec?
Yeah, it's humbling in a lot of ways. And every day really is a point of learning in some area of the business. And that could be technical, that could be people, that could be navigating international challenges, that could be understanding the implications of bigger contracts. And likewise, how we as a business need to grow, not only to meet our customer demand and be able to maintain this full turnkey approach for how we support power quality and grid connection requirements. But with the industry changing and revolving so dramatically, regulation becoming more and more important, technical challenges not just being solved but identified, and then just navigating the entire landscape. No 2 days are the same. Funnily enough, I came from probably the most opposite background to electrical engineering that I think you could have. And that was pre-marketing. That was me as a Middle Eastern archaeology graduate. And I did both of my degrees in archaeology, but it was very much around sociopolitical context, why people make certain decisions, and data. What data did you have to be able to back up these types of assumptions? Which played very well into marketing, because marketing is all about data collection, and what types of, decisions people will make in the future. But from something so current and something so impactful to the world, and something that is so complex and not understood by the layman, and is something that needs to be better understood so that people can be informed on why the sort of energy landscape is the way that it is. Um, it's just been a really interesting challenge, and I feel fortunate to learn every day.
I love that. I know we've previously had a discussion around kind of a bit of imposter syndrome when stepping into the role of CEO. Talk me through that. How was getting elected for CEO and Spec?
Yeah, it was interesting, and I wanted to give a shout out to our Ned, who I originally met at a networking sort of professional development organization. And when we had the opportunity to step into the MBO, for whatever reason, not fully even understanding his background or expertise, in my brain, I was like, I need to speak to Vikas. Like, Vikas is the person that we go to because he has extensive experience, not only in business and business growth, but in mergers and acquisitions and what they mean and what types of things to consider. And so it was a really easy decision for us as part of what we wanted to do just as a new management team before titles were even decided with me and Tim to
Mhm.
say it makes sense for Vikas to be a Ned and an advisor for our business, and he's always done a fantastic job. But it was Vikas who, originally said he was like, Tim is fantastic. He would be fantastic, but it
Mhm.
would detract him from the technical side of the business. CEOs need to be chatty and forward facing. They need to be able to address challenges head on. And he said, I think this is a good skill set for you. At that time, and it's true from going from a marketing director to sort of a leader of the business, I think my aspirations probably sat at CMO. And I was like that I could do, I let go get him. And it was working with a really great mentor and advisor who said, pragmatically for the business, I think you would be really good for this. And so when we had a board meeting, um, it was him who presented it as I think Mara would be right for this role. And then it was elected amongst the board members as a sort of yes or no. And the majority said yes, that they felt like I was the right person for the role too, which is, a really strong point when it comes to advocacy and advocate for people in the room, because I think it's natural and human, unfortunately, for people to want to pigeonhole themselves in terms of what do I think I will excel at versus what do I think is actually a step beyond what I would have even imagined for myself. Um, but the play between Tim and I, we still equally run the business together. We still make decisions together. But very much so, he is front of clients, leading projects, solving technical challenges, changing the world. And I am leading the business, ensuring that we adhere to proper governance and building the team. And I think that dynamic is working really well.
Fantastic. I think as you've transitioned through Enspec and now leading the company as CEO, the business has seen exponential growth in such a short period of time, which is huge, especially in a technical consultancy base. From your perspective, what's changed strategically?
Um, a lot of it has to do with speaking to our consultancy team, because we have three core revenue generating departments. So we have consultancy, which arguably again, and how the stars have aligned was the department that I was my first focus, because that was the one that I was brought in to really grow. It had two engineers at the time, and I should clarify that when I was a freelancer, we were actually a team of 12. When we finally sort of completed the MBO, when we were a team of 17, the majority of that growth was the consultancy department, and that was just based off of demand and what we needed, what types of projects we had in place.
Yeah.
Um, but that consultancy department is what I account for as like the brain of the body that is NSPEC. And it really does dictate and feed into the sort of strategic insight in terms of what the industry is doing, what are our customers' pain points, what are the challenges, what are the future challenges of things that they don't understand. And what's so interesting now is that we have such a good base. Again, we went from offering a few power system studies by a few select people. We've recently done a workshop to sort of provide clarity on our full capability because it's expanded so dramatically over the last few years. We offer 60 different power system studies now, with quite an expanded team, and so much of speaking to the team is what's going well, what's not going well. And that's not just from a how are the projects performing, but when the clients come in, who's informed, who's not informed, who knows the process and what to expect, who's panicking because things are late and they don't know what to do. And you start to see trends and challenges, and that's the information which we use to say, okay, we actually can fix this challenge here, whether it be lead time that our key competitors, can't meet, or if it's the need for one of our senior directors to be more involved from a technical perspective. We still have this capability in terms of flexibility with really top level expertise to support our customers in any way that we need to. And it's that information from our consultancy department, which really is the theoretical simulation, power system studies, technical side, which then feeds into manufacturing. It feeds into site services. It feeds into innovations that we can support. And that's so I love sitting with our power system engineers and running webinars with our power system engineers and just getting their insight on how do you think everything's going?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the main things that I really admire about your leadership approach. You are very open in the fact that you're not the most technical person in the room or in the business. You've got clarity, delegation, and you surround yourself with people who are smarter than you in their lane, essentially. So I think you handle that pretty well in terms of your leadership style.
Thank you. Yeah.
In terms of kind of building for the future, you guys are clearly investing long term. You've just recently set up a graduate program. So for development and culture, that's super important. But why is it so critical right now for you guys?
Yeah. This interestingly stems back to this initial consultancy piece that I did as a freelancer. And when I was asked for department growth, the strategy was all around customers. It was all around how do we get more work in. Um, and when that worked and it worked so well, it then had to be around how do we get the right people in to help facilitate this work? Because there's too much for us to be able to do with the team that we have. And that was an eye opening experience because it pushed me into the realm of recruitment. And fundamentally, our business message changed from capability and we can do this, and this is what this means, to we're a great place to work and there's a lot of opportunity and we are growing and we are scaling. And I really do feel like it's important to say all of the messaging and our focus on being an employer of choice is authentic, but at the same time, it is strategic because we wanted top tier people to come in. And when that process was really first starting out, being a small engineering firm like we were, there were restrictions on, our capability to sponsor international candidates and, being able to offer certain salary and benefit ranges and, what was actually going to be realistic and feasible for us to be able to get the right type of talent in.
Mhm.
And I remember when we went to hire our sort of first third, our newest addition to the power system team, who was going to be the third member of the power system team. And I put out the advert and left it for 2 weeks and had over 400 applicants in during that time. And I remember, it was very clear directive. We were not going to give out sponsorship. They had to have right to work in the UK. We weren't a business who could cover that level of risk or investment as of yet. And there were 7 of the 400 who said they had right to work in the UK. Yeah, 4 of them lied.
Yeah.
And 3 of them were brand new graduates and
Mm,
didn't have industry experience, which was also a requirement. And this was like a really eye-opening moment. I was like, I actually don't know if that's possible. Like,
mhm.
I don't know if it's possible for us to do this with, sort of constraints that we had in place. And the impression at the time was really because we didn't have a brand recognition when it came to being an employer of choice. There were much bigger players who could offer, different types of incentives, and arguably, different types of projects depending on what each key individual wanted to do, which was its own sort of industry deep dive piece to understand the landscape that we were up against from a technical skills perspective. And so we then had to open it up, and we had to say, right, well, we're likely going to have to sponsor because the skill set is out there, but it's not in the UK, and it's not at a sort of we can't compete with what skill is within the UK and sort of headhunt the people from bigger players. And we ended up deciding, because it took so long, it took, I think, a full year for us to
Wow.
initially start that, we need these people now. And, there was a lot of overtime worked to be able to get through the work that we had to actually being able to get somebody in the business. And so we ended up hiring two candidates, and the reason why we did that, because it was double the investment. It was double it was double the salary. It was double the visa costs. It was double everything. But my fear was this was unknown territory. This was a real risk in terms of whether or not the individuals were going to be the right fit for the business. Would they like it? This is a thing that's like you're asking them to move their life to the UK. Is this something that they're going to be happy with? And so we found two candidates who we really liked, and we felt like they had skill sets suited to different things. And I remember having the conversation of, we really don't, we really need these people now. They're like, we're far behind in terms of what we need to be able to continue the growth strategy, because we need to operationally be able to fulfill the work. I think we should hire both. And we did. And it was like the first big step into investment in terms of our own growth strategy. And at that point, it was that point that I was like, right, the short term strategy is we're going to spend a lot of money. We're going to headhunt all over the world. We're going to recruit all over the world. And we're going to bring the best people in for the job now to develop the team. But it's not sustainable long term. And there's only going to be so many people who, want to operate that way. There's a real opportunity to develop UK skill set, because it's that there aren't enough engineers here who understand not just UK grid code requirements, but the types of software that we need, our type of quality control. Because when you do bring in senior people, they're great. This is not there's no criticism, but they come with their own way of working. They come with different types of understandings when it comes to report writing and quality control. And when you're a business and you submit a report, that's your reputation. That's you need it done in a certain way. And so there were also risks we could support to mitigate in terms of getting people up to speed more quickly, and developing out the skill set of the team in a stronger way by investing in people earlier on. So it took several years for us to get there, but we're leading into our second year now of the graduate training program, and it's really exciting because we've had some fantastic candidates who have just come to us before we've even launched, saying, "I
Fantastic.
think I'm the right person." Yeah,
Brilliant. It's a real good way to attract talent. And obviously, myself, I work in the sector and I know how hard niche and specialist talent can be in the UK. And it's not just yourself, other companies are struggling and some don't provide sponsorship. And the fact that you're investing in people right from the start to be able to grow their career with Enspec, and you're giving them the training, the tools, and most importantly, the leadership and the technical expertise is fantastic. And in the long run, you'll see that start to feed back into the business with the investment.
absolutely.
So
Thank you.
absolutely brilliant. I know that one thing that you've said previously that's kind of really stuck with me is the industry's about people capability, especially when it comes to kind of power engineering. So one of the biggest blockers in the energy transition is not ambition, not funding, but it's more expertise. And you can see that with some competitors that you're up against in terms of them not having the firepower. How's that affect Enspec?
It is interesting, and again, back to the original strategic piece around developing the consultancy department. When we first started, it was actually highlighted as a risk. It was like when we did our SWOT analysis, it was the weakness was industry perception was you could not do the power system studies, which dictated whether or not you met compliance that required equipment if you were also going to manufacture the equipment. Uh, and this was something that we were aware of and was a challenge because people would say, well, you could do the consultancy or you could do the manufacturing. Which would you want to do? From a revenue perspective, manufacturing is a significantly higher contract. So that was that was the sort of smart commercial move. However, um, as the industry has expanded, particularly within consultancy, and electrical engineering and power engineering is just like any industry. People see that there is an opportunity and room to grow, and the investment into consultancy is significantly less than the investment into manufacturing.
Yeah.
Consultancy, yes, you need a degree, you need to understand how to use software, you need a license to that software, and you need a computer, and you can work more or less remotely. Um, but you have to know what you're doing. And that is where we are seeing things get tripped up. And often it can be reflected more through our manufacturing, because we have had instances whereby people have come to us and they've said, we've used a third party consultant. They have said, we require a 33 kV harmonic filter. You manufacture it. And we've taken one look at the report saying, you don't want that filter because it's either too expensive to build, impossible to build, or nonsensical because the filter losses equate the entire power generation of the site. It's like really interesting things that it's just people passing things around that they don't understand. And then it gets to a point where that was going to be a 300,000 pound investment for something that wasn't going to work. And so what we know is there are a lot of power system consultants who have software licenses, and you can do this thing called a filter drop where you bring in you drop in a filter into where it's needed, and you can configure, kind of put in try different sort of configurations to make the whole site compliant. And it could just be fundamentally incorrect. It's because there's the practical knowledge of how that would be applied is not there. And that is where we've actually developed a reputation for our as a strength, because we have like made sure to make it very clear when something is needed, it's fully justified, and there is an element of like a black art to filter design, because of assumptions that you need to make within the data. And if you're overly optimistic, everything could pass. And then we've also seen clients come to us saying, we've had this power system study that's passed from somebody else, but the grid is telling us that it's causing issues and actually it should have failed. And that's when sites get shut down, or they're told that they have to sort of fix the issue within a period of time. But you can also be overly, pessimistic, which we are very careful not to do. Uh, and because of this, we have certain clients come to us and they say that people will only use us for a harmonic assessment because we understand both sides of it. And so that initial weakness has become a really big strength, uh, which is exciting.
100%. And it's building your reputation as a business, knowing that they can definitely come to you for that side of things. I know that you've said previously, specifically around your view on a fully green grid, from your perspective, it's not technically possible, kind of yet or anytime in the near future. Is that because of third parties like that? What's your technical view on that side of things?
Partly, yeah. I think it's interesting. Our director of consultancy is one of these. I would say is one of these super geniuses that I work with, who is absolutely a global expert with what he does, and he has presented 3 case study slash thought leadership pieces on international stages, all based around the same topic of aggregate harmonics, uh, which he could have just done it on one site, but he looked at sites individually, and we do have information about some of this topic on our website, in our sort of insight pieces. And we are going to be doing a webinar on the topic in more detail this year because we see that the industry really does need to understand this and have this knowledge. But if you have sites A and B, and they're compliant and they're connected to the grid and everything is working well. And then you add in site C, and C submitted its power system studies, which showed that it was fully compliant and everything was okay. But the data wasn't assumed fully accurately, or there was something that was overly optimistic, and there is actually an issue. It 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 has an opportunity to not show up on site C, but actually show up on sites A and B. And it's
Mhm.
this type of compound effect when you look at how much we're actually connecting to the grid, the rate we are connecting to the grid, what that means for the parties who are responsible to check whether or not things are actually meeting compliance standards accurately. Um, if they themselves have the detailed knowledge needed to point out whether or not something is optimistic or not, that compound effect can have serious impact. And that's one thing where it's like, really, from a monitoring perspective, this is where um, I see opportunity for optimization and improvement. And it's some of the types of innovation pieces that we're often involved in, is around monitoring grid and grid response. So it's this is one area, but I think fundamentally there are a lot of it is complex. There are a lot of different areas by which things aren't quite fully figured out. We are taking a grid that was built for conventional generation and has a really strong centralized system, which I often tell people is like a heart with an artery network around it. And now we are moving to a distributed energy network where we are putting these big hearts on, teeny tiny vascular systems that don't have the infrastructure around them. It comes with all sorts of complexities. And really, and I sort of, one of the big ones is inertia. And the UK actually has a really great eye on inertia and inertia requirements, and they do stability pathfinder, and they launch a stability pathfinder initiative quite regularly, and it's something that we've been involved in from a feasibility study perspective. Um, but when you go back to what happened in Spain a good few months ago, and they experienced the blackout, which was, sort of pinpointed down to a lack of inertia, the the consequences of not moving too quickly, kind of losing visibility of what's happening and not understanding, how the grid is operating and what types of technical changes are being asked of it does have pretty catastrophic effects. And so that's why I also have a lot of sympathy for why there does seem to be the traditional view is that things need to move slowly, they need to move prudently, because they understand what's happening and they understand how to sort of control what's in place. Where big leaps in technology or big changes and big innovations that are going to change everything may very well be the answer, and that's not up for debate. But you can't say that they all will be, and you also have to be mindful of what is in place currently that has to be monitored.
Yeah, 100%. And then, of course, you need the manpower enabled to
And then
uh,
you need the people
put
who
the
understand.
infrastructure.
Yes.
Absolutely. But I think you summarised it really well as referring to the grid as a heart. And most leaders that I speak to, the biggest challenge in the sector is humanising the renewable energy industry. It can be so technical, and from a non-technical place yourself, being able to refer to it as human organisms, I think makes it so much easier for people to understand on that side of things. You're also one of relatively few female CEOs in this part of the energy ecosystem. So I'd be super keen to find out how you feel that responsibility.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I really like a business as its own little ecosystem is the truth of it. And a lot of my focus gets to be on people and initiatives and growth and to work with ambitious people who want to be involved in learning and development. They want to progress, they want to get better. And when you're in this type of environment, I think it's very easy to kind of forget that from a demographic perspective, I'm unusual because I work with I work with a lot of great people who just don't care, and I think that that's an important thing that as an individual, let alone a leader, are surrounding yourself with people who respect you as a person and your opinion, and what you bring and your perspective. And it's not that it is without challenge, but that's when you open up and you listen to where they're coming from and why that suggestion might be in place, and taking it on board and implementing it appropriately, or countering with why our perspectives are different. It's only really when I sometimes go to really big industry wide events, and all of a sudden it's very evident that I am a strong minority within the room, and I have really great colleagues who are still very forward about introducing me and who I am in the business, and we work with some great individuals who have reputable names who have worked in lots of different engineering environments previously, but sometimes nobody is explicit about it. Of course not. Everybody's very professional, but sometimes you get this glazed look, and when somebody says, this is Mara, CEO of Enspec, and they kind of look at the individual like he's made a mistake. And you're a bit like, oh, yeah, hi.
Yeah.
I feel like my responsibility is to the team and to finance and to technical translation and to a lot of things that happen behind the scenes. And our CTO, Tim, is leading the revenue generating departments. He is a technical engineer. He is brilliant. We work with brilliant engineering colleagues. And so I myself, tell people, I'm like, when you are working with clients and the question is around Enspec's capability, it's not me who you build within that room. It's Tim and it's Kareem and it's all of our brilliant engineers, because fundamentally they're going to deliver the project. And so that's it. It's about building. It's about being who I am, regardless of where I am, but also being mindful of what is important to the client and building that
Mm.
appropriately.
Yeah, absolutely. I think standing by your values and what you believe in is most important, and then supporting and delegating throughout the team where their expertise best lie and relying on that. So it shows the kind of team that you've got supporting you to enable you to drive the business forwards. I'm quite keen to understand, what advice would you give to women in the industry who are faced with technical or male dominant environments? Is there anything that you'd pass on from personal perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think this point around authenticity is important. And I'd like to say that the industry is evolving and it is changing. And a lot of this I can actually see from conversations that are taking place on LinkedIn, which is, I think, an underestimated resource of information on perspective
Mhm.
within our industry. And you do see things that are posed from a sort of male centric perspective, and um, can often, be perceived as maybe being degrading to women or the women's perspective. But I also see a lot of people pushing back. And I seeing people come in with different perspectives on how to navigate those situations. And so I don't I don't think that what was maybe once a majority perspective is being treated that way, even if the actual demographic percentage of women within the industry is still a minority. I think that's growing, and I think that people are generally being more accepting, and all of that comes from competence and capability. And this question around how do you navigate asking technical questions? Um, I'm a big advocate for self-research,
Hmm.
and this is something where it's like I can find out as much as I can understand and get to the point where I'm like, me reading this 10 times over isn't gonna help. I need somebody to answer this question, and I will come in with I've looked at this, I've looked at this, I've done this reading, I've watched this. It's this bit that's just not landing. And what other angle am I not seeing this from? And I think people appreciate when you make an effort to learn for yourself and then come in with questions or perspective that they may have thought, oh, yeah, like I just got that bit, but I always struggled with this bit. But I can see why that bit would be difficult to understand if you were looking at it from that angle. And it's an empathy piece, If you surround yourself with empathetic people who are patient, you're going to learn better. If you're surrounded by people who are not empathetic and who are not patient, you should
Hmm.
probably find a new room.
100%. I love that. And I think you've demonstrated really well that the industry, it really is going through a transition, not just from skill set, but also from a cultural perspective, from a diversity perspective, and also the energy generation. It's been absolutely fantastic having you on here, Mara. I would like to ask you to leave our listeners with one last thought to help power up the future. What would it be?
Ooh, I think always keep questioning and always look for improvement. And that is with yourself, that's with your team, that's how things are communicated. And I think this is relevant to so many industries, but I think it's particularly relevant to the energy industry and to engineering, because it's every day should be a day of learning. And even though we've done something for 20 years, it doesn't mean that there's not another way of working. And sometimes that other way of working is what leads to exponential growth. So always keep learning.
Fantastic. I love that. Truly inspiring. And it's been absolutely a pleasure to have you on Powered Up.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. If anybody would like to check out the work that yourself and Enspec are doing at the moment, where should they go?
www.enspecpower.com. Or as well, please follow our Enspec LinkedIn channel because that is where the majority of our thought leadership case studies, webinars are shared.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, thanks again, Mara. And for everyone else listening, we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you so much.